that is being raised to a lofty level, and the other is nuzul. So the Prophet Muhammad did perform Saud, that is going towards Allah. That is the love and the sincerity and loyalty was such in the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, that great Lord, he attained a rank of twofold upon the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. Dunuf is a greater meaning than Akrab. That is why it has been mentioned here. This means that in comparison to Qurub, Dunuf has a vaster and a better meaning. In the meaning of Qurub, all that it entails is a perception of closeness, but in the word Dunuf, the closeness or the meaning of closeness is so forceful that it entails becoming one. The promised Messiah ﷺ says that when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ partook of the beneficence and mercy of Almighty Allah, then he was sent as a mercy for all mankind. This was that same mercy that is indicated in the verse وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَى رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And this means that we have not sent you except as a mercy for all mankind. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the word Qasim here also refers to this, that he partook from Almighty Allah, and then he conveys this to the creation of Almighty Allah. So this conveying to the creation of Almighty Allah was the purpose of his advent. In this Dana Fatadallah, the nearness to Almighty Allah, this indicates towards that Saud and Nuzul. And this is also a proof of the loftier status of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. So Hazur says, through the advent of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the new heavens and earth and the universe that were formed because of that, and when he attained the nearest level of being close to Almighty Allah, he provided the means of salvation for humans and also the love of Almighty Allah, and he also attained the rank of being the intercessor between humankind and Almighty Allah. Allah then granted him the status of Rahmatul lil Alameen, the mercy for all mankind. Love of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was declared love of Almighty Allah. So this proves that as a result of that special love of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Allah, all of this was created as a result of that. And there is no reason whatsoever that we should not accept this Hadith-e-Qudsi as authentic. We are very fortunate indeed that we have come under the bayt, the pledge of allegiance of the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam, and we have recognized the status of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam. Explaining this verse further, the promised Messiah alayhi salam says that this tradition of law laka lama khalaqtul akhlaq, what difficulty is entailed therein? The Holy Quran states, khalaqa lakum ma fil ardi jami'a. This means that whatever is in the earth, that is for the sake of ordinary people. So can there not be amongst the special people those for whom the whole creation is made? If everything in the whole earth is for ordinary people, then why can't Allah the Almighty make the whole creation, the whole universe for the sake of His special people? The promised Messiah ﷺ states that in fact when Adam was made the Khalifa, the successor, one wisdom in it was that through this creation, through these people, he could employ them to fulfill the wish and the will of Almighty Allah. And those things that are not in the control of people, through the will of Almighty Allah, they are operating for the sake of people. For example, the stars and the moons and the sun. So Hazur says, people do not have control over these things, but according to the will of Almighty Allah, all of these things are operating for the sake of humankind. According to the instruction of Almighty Allah, most of all, These things operate for the sake of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These operated the most in the past, and similarly they are operating most of all for him in the present. In the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, there is the incident of Shaqul Qamar, the splitting of the moon. This was a miracle that was seen by the world. I will not go into the details of this at this time, but the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam, he has stated this very fact. And he says this miracle occurred. And furthermore, he says in another place that perhaps this relates to a solar eclipse that people saw. Then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he prophesied something for the sake of his Mahdi, that in such and such month and in this specific day the solar and the lunar eclipse would take place. So all of these are things within the universe, and these relate to things being controlled within the heavens and the earth. And the newspapers of that time when the eclipse took place, they testified that this did take place. Anyhow, the purpose of this explanation and introduction of mine was to mention the lofty station of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Apart from this, there were countless miracles of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, that we find in hadith, that is traditions, where it mentions his special rank and his special connection with Almighty Allah, the examples of which we never found before. But despite all of these things, despite this, Allah the Almighty, in response to this demand of the disbelievers from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that in front of our eyes go to the heavens and bring back a book that we can read. So Allah the Almighty says in response to this that Kul Subhana Rabbi Hal Kuntu Illa Bashar Rasul, that say to them that my Lord is pure from these things. I am only a human messenger. So Hazur says the status of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, although it was greater than all humans, because he is the perfect man. But with respect to being a Bashar Rasul, that is a human messenger, Allah the Almighty dealt with him in the same way that he dealt with all the other prophets. So this meant that just as all the other prophets, they were opposed by the nations that they were sent to. Similarly, he was opposed. And because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is for all people and all times, his opposition occurred at that time, in his life as well, and he is being opposed even now, today. And he will continue to be opposed in the future as well. All prophets were mocked at. Hence, he was also mocked at. And he is being mocked at even today. But there were good-natured people who accept prophets in the past, and they similarly accepted the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his time. Indeed, they accepted him the most. Even within his lifetime, Islam spread beyond the boundaries of Arabia. Then the world saw that Islam spread in Arabia and it spread to the neighboring areas around Arabia, and then Islam spread to the entire world. And Islam is continuing to spread even in the present. A time will come when the majority of the world will come under the banner of Islam and the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. One of the responsibilities placed upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was tabligh, propagation of the faith. Allah states, "Balligh ma unzila ilayka min rabbik," that this message and this word that was descended from Allah to you, convey that to the people. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with love, with patience, with forgiveness, and through prayers, he conveyed this message. The opponents do raise this allegation upon the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, that he spread Islam using the sword. But even some Muslim scholars, or those who call themselves scholars, they held this perception as well, that Islam was spread through compulsion. Although after the migration, when the migration occurred from Mecca to Medina, and then when the Battle of Badr took place, that took place in the following year. So from that period until the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, various wars took place in between, when most of all in the War of Azab, the number of Muslims